we're a farm brewery, so we source local ingredients. We know local farmers, maltsters. It's important to us to be close to our ingredients. We actually, a really cool story that I'm pretty proud of is we actually brewed a beer, I think it was 2 summers ago, that the furthest ingredient from us was 14 miles. We are dog friendly, we're kid friendly, we have games like you don't have to come get them. Your dog comes in, we're holding the treat when they come through the door. You bring in a kid, we got a bucket full of chalk, sidewalk chalk. Like you let your kid chalk up whatever they want. Yeah. Enjoy a couple beers. Hang out. We'll light a fire for you. It's not any one thing. It's everything.
All right, awesome. Well, Kyle, Connor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers. Let's kick it off.
Cheers.
So, I guess, good opening question, since Kyle told me you hate this question. What's your favorite beer here?
I don't hate the question. I hate answering the question before anybody's identified anything they like, because beer's subjective. Like what I like, what you like, what Connor likes may not all be the same thing.
Yeah.
But often somebody asks me what I like, and my favorite, I have 2 favorite beers, but my favorite beer is Queensbridge. My second one is our Pilsner, which is what we're drinking. But if I answer Queensbridge, they're like, well, I don't like IPAs. So like, why the hell did you ask me what I like if you don't care?
Yeah.
But so that's why. But after somebody orders it, then I'm happy to share with them that it's my favorite beer.
Yeah. I mean, I had the Queensbridge earlier, had the West Coast IPA, this is the Pilsner. All 3 were good. So,
well, thank you.
Glad
you
to
guys
hear
are
it.
doing a great job in my book.
I'm glad to hear it.
So, I mean, let's dive into the story of Big aLICE. How'd you guys get started, and how are you here today? Like, what does the whole trajectory look like?
How much time do we have?
You got as much time as you need.
All right. So I'll try to say this as succinctly as I can, but it's often not easy. So I like to tell people I started homebrewing before it was cool, like in the late 90s. Back then, everybody thought you made beer. If you were a homebrewer, you made it in your tub. And maybe somebody can make good beer in their tub. I don't know how it's possible. But so it actually started, I was at a friend's house for Memorial Day weekend, and I tried his homebrew and like just kind of fell in love with it. And I drank a ton of macro beers at that point. I could crush a case of Miller Lite or Busch Light or Natty, or we were having a conversation earlier about all of those. But I think my wife saw how I kind of lit up and was excited about beer with flavor. And the next holiday that came up was Father's Day a few weeks later, and she bought me my first homebrew kit. Started homebrewing then and did that for about the next 10 years. Moved to New York from Wisconsin, brought my hobby with me, introduced it to some of my coworkers, and a couple years later the laws were changing. The industry was kind of burgeoning, and actually a friend of mine who had taught to homebrew came to me and said, you should open a brewery, or we should open a brewery. I'm like, nah. And really what sealed it for me is like we were already brewing once a month together anyway, and making 5-gallon batches. And he's like, I found this system where we can make like 10 to 12-gallon batches, so we'll still be able to keep the same amount of beer. It'll take the same amount of time to brew, but we can sell half of it, more or less have everybody else pay for our hobby. And I'm like, I love the idea of that. So that's how we started. And we used to brew, making beer with whatever ingredients we could get our hands on from CSAs or local farmers markets, food co-ops, stuff like that. And it's kind of like canning in that we would capture the flavors of the season. So we'd brew, we'd let it ferment for a month, and then we'd do a secondary fermentation for a month, and then a bottle conditioning for a month before we release it. So whatever was fresh 3 months ago is now in our beer, so we're kind of like revisiting the flavors of whatever that season was. So that's why I say it was like canning. Yeah. But we pre-sold subscriptions to our beer, and you would pay $200 for a case of beer. You got 2 bottles a month for 6 months, and you gave us the money all up front, and you didn't know what you were getting. Because we made 8 different beers a weekend. We brewed 1 weekend a month, and that was really cool and really fun. And our first round, it was mostly friends and family and some of the general public. And then second, so it was 6 month subscription. Second round, we got some of our friends and family fell off because we had actual people who were looking to get it. But the third time around, we had a waiting list, and that's when we found a brew house from a brew pub in Connecticut, and went from 10 or 12 gallons to 5 barrels, and kind of went from there to over the next few years, growing, expanding that business, adding a barrel aging facility in Brooklyn, and ultimately a second brewery and tap house up here in Geneva in the Finger Lakes.
Wow, man. So this started as basically a homebrewing hobby in the 90s in Wisconsin. And between that time and when you actually opened a taproom location, it was like 15 years or so?
So I was probably around 98. I started homebrewing. We moved to New York in 2008. We got the idea around late 2010, early 2011. We formed the company in September of 2011. Got licensed late 2012. Didn't open our doors till 2013. So it's not like you're like, oh, let's open a brewery, and it's like buying a house and you close in 60 days or 90 days. Yeah. It was some time. Yeah. So that whole process took time, and over that time, we continued to brew and hone our craft.
Yeah. So you had some time.
Which sounds a little arrogant, but no, we were home brewers, so we were still getting better. I'd like to think we're still getting better today.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a process that never stops. You never stop trying to get better, but you had some time to refine everything and eventually get to the point where the beer was so good that you had a waiting list for the subscription before you even had a tap room.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing that was a differentiator for us is it wasn't like we were taking the same recipe and like honing and trying to dial in our Pilsner or our IPA. Or we actually, through those 18 months where we had that subscription model, we didn't make the same beer twice. So it was all different beers every month, different ingredients. Some were better than others, I'm sure. And I still hear from people who were part of that early on thinking like, that was not for me. That's cool, but thank you for supporting us.
But it was about the experience of trying something
new.
It
was. And at the time, the probably a resurgence, but insurgence of craft beer. Like everybody wanted to try something new all the time. Mm-hmm. Like they didn't want the same beer. Like I've already done that. Like that's what our fathers did, and our grandfathers did. Is they drank the same beer their whole life, right? Yeah. They had a fridge full of Old Milwaukee or whatever it was. So it wasn't until we made that next step to the bigger brew house, and then we were doing kegs instead of those individual bottles, and opened a tap room that we realized there actually are people who want to come in and drink the same beer every time.
Yeah.
So then that was when we first started, rebrewing and creating. I still don't like calling them flagships, but year-round beers.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say. And even at year-round, we still have gaps of weeks or months.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay. And so, Connor, you joined the picture when?
2021-ish. I mean, so Kyle's my father, which is the only reason why this part makes sense. Is like from when I was 19-ish onwards, because I was in college, I would go to New York City as like my summer job, because minimum wage in Wisconsin and New York are night and day different.
Mm-hmm. $10 apart?
Yeah. I think at that time they were $8.50 apart. But so 2021 is when I genuinely started working for the brewery. But prior to that, I was bar backing or helping out or taste testing the home brews back when I was like in diapers or something in that era.
We do have pictures of him being my assistant brewer at 2 years old.
Yeah, and a set of Huggies.
We'll have to cut this part out of the podcast.
Well, he wasn't drinking that.
And it wasn't licensed then either.
testing.
So yeah.
It was homebrew.
That was not part of the licensed business.
No.
But so then loosely involved and was doing corporate sales, and then Kyle called me and I think the beginning part of 2021 and asked if I was interested in moving to Geneva and jumping on, and I was absolutely pumped just because corporate sales is fun. It's not fun at all, but it's honest work and it teaches you a lot fast.
And it's more lucrative.
Yeah, it is a bit more lucrative. But it's more exciting to do something that you're passionate about, is more fun. The role's ever changing. Your responsibility, what you're trying to work on, is ever changing. So it's just been a lot more, engaging and fulfilling, I guess.
Cool. And so, what's your official role here today?
Shit rolls downhill. But in reality, it's head of sales and operations. Head of sales and operations.
And whatever I call him and ask him to do.
Yeah, that was the
Head
shit
of
rolls down.
sales and operations is a pretty all-encompassing.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
It's-
Kyle helps out a ton, but yeah, it's just whatever. It is head of sales and operations, but it's just, yeah.
It's just make sure nothing falls
Whatever's the
apart.
priority at the time is
Yeah,
the number one
makes
priority at
sense.
the time for the whole skeleton crew we're running with, yeah.
Makes sense. So this is a unique situation as far as the podcast goes because I've never had the opportunity to interview a brewery or winery or distillery that has that family dynamic within the operations. So what's that like for you guys as a father-son duo, working on the business together?
Do you want to go first or me?
I'd like you to go first.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a ton of fun. Like, the quick changes are like the weirdest ones where it's like, you say like, yeah, I'll come work for you. And then it's like, because my uncle's also involved. So then you have to quickly flip. It's like, all right, 9 to 5. And for brewery, it's a little more flexible than 9 to 5. And I'm not going to be like, hey, Dad, what do you think about this brewery thing? You just quick switch to like Kyle and Scott. Mainly because there's nothing more annoying if you ever worked for someone that like works with their family is being like, oh, let me ask my dad. It's like, all right, well, I'm not asking to sleep over. Like, I'm asking about, the budget for cans. Yeah. That's honestly like the biggest weird thing. But other than that, it's just,
So
it's been fun to kind of keep things like separate where it's like business call, father call.
you call him Kyle during work hours.
But
and then
now
Dad
I'm broken. It's just Kyle.
Okay,
He
got it.
hardly ever calls me dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
My original plan was being like, I'll just call you Kyle when I'm referring to someone else.
Yeah.
And then within like a month of doing that, it's just like, and I can't go back.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right, so now your turn.
Yeah, he kind of captured a lot of it is, we're not actually set up as a family-owned business. Like, that's not our corporate structure. So actually, he replaced somebody who had the title of head of sales and operations. Actually, a guy who was amazing at his job. He was really good. He actually was English. He worked for Woolworths and some other. He would forecast our sales within 0.1%.
Really?
The man was amazing.
Wow.
He was way underpaid for how good he was. Really, really a brilliant man. And during the pandemic, he and his wife moved to Vegas. We had an opening, and my brother-in-law, my business partner, Uncle Scott, or Scott now as he's known, we were talking about, all right, so who do we find to replace? Mark was our previous head of sales and ops, and we're like, we all have friends now who have kids who are out of college, probably working in their professional life for some number of years, and and beer and brewing is hot. Like, so we want somebody who's good at numbers, like Mark was, and like, all right, so we need somebody who's good at numbers, young, willing to take a cut and pay.
Yeah.
Because it's a pretty significant cut and pay
Yeah.
to come work in the beer industry, and all these elements were being pitched to me by Scott, and I stopped and said, do you know who you're describing? He's like, no, who? Because we had some mutual friends in Westchester, around New York City, who all fit that bill. But I said, you're describing your nephew, my son. And I said, there's no way he'll take the cut and pay, but we can ask him.
Yeah.
And we did, and to both of our surprise, he said yes. And it's really exciting and cool to have my son in the company. And it is a challenge because, nepotism is real, obviously, and we're not a family company, and we did hire a family member, but he was working for an international data analytics company, in not Sarasota, Fort Myers, Florida.
Fort Myers, yeah.
And so he fit everything we were looking for.
Yeah.
He just happened to be family.
Yeah.
But then, when he came on board, we wanted to make sure that people weren't like, oh, you just hired your son.
Yeah.
Your son. Like, no, he's actually qualified and really good at his job. And so, I don't know, this is a long answer, but I often don't offer up that he's my son until it's already been established in the working relationship or the business relationship, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That he is who he is and what he does, and he's good at it. And he's not here because he's my son.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of him. Like, he's good at his job, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, well, I think, there's also there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're good at your job, which it sounds like you are.
Yeah.
It's like, it's different if someone hires their family member and then the kid is just not.
It's not working out right.
Yeah.
Like, how do you have that
You keep
conversation?
them around.
Yeah, like if I was brought on to be the brewer, it would have been apparent in the worst way possible that it was a nepotism hire.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But,
And then
yeah, I
also
mean-
the one tip for anyone that doesn't work for their father is if you need a seat at the table when you're talking to a bigger company, just say the owner's your dad. Because that's usually when I pull it out strategically is if you're like trying to meet with someone, they won't do it and be like, yeah, well, it's owned by my father and uncle. So, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I got that meeting set up a little quicker than I expected.
Yeah, there you go. Then you just got to get the boss to go along with it.
Yeah, I guess maybe that part's the hurdle I didn't really think of, but
Yeah.
He's pretty dialed in. He knows how I think and
Well,
operate.
no, I mean, it shows in the results that this is a popular brewery in the area, and you guys have had a lot of success. So, it's apparent that you have a good team and that everybody's doing their job and pulling their weight. So,
For sure. Yeah, it's people, right? Like you can make beer, but we had this conversation earlier too, where it's about experience. For me, like there's, you can go anywhere and get a good beer, and you can go anywhere and hang out with your friends, but like it's the overall experience and environment, and that comes from the people who are catering that environment for you.
yeah, 100%. So I want to dive back into the story of Big ALICE a little bit. So you guys at one point had 3 tap rooms, and now you've zeroed in on Finger Lakes. So you were in New York for a little bit, and you had the aLICE location and then the Brooklyn location, right? And then you are now zeroing in on Finger Lakes. So what was that process like, and where do you feel the future of Big ALICE is headed?
So, so like I said, we started in Queens. Just for a little backstory, people hear Long Island City and they stop at Long Island, like, oh, you guys are Long Island. So Queens is the only borough in New York City that uses its neighborhoods for its addresses.
Yeah.
So we were Long Island City, Queens, New York. Mm-hmm. It's all the same place. And I had this conversation with the State Liquor Authority, with the federal government, where they're like, are you guys in Queens or are you in Long Island City? And I'd be like, yes. Like, you really want me to know this? We're also in New York City. And, so our address means really nothing. It's pretty generic and widespread. But, so we started there, and in doing so, like, we established there were 3 or 4 of us breweries who were opening in Queens who all thought we were going to be the first brewery in Queens since Prohibition.
Yeah.
So we were excited about that, and there was a lot of energy. And actually, at the time that we opened, I thought we missed the curve. Like, we were opening late. Mm-hmm. And I still feel like we're a new brewery, and obviously we're one of the oldest breweries. So we did finally open in Queens in 2013, and at that time we were brewery number 92 or so in New York State. We were number 12 or so in New York City, and there were like 2,200 in the country. Mm-hmm. Today there's 45 in New York City, there's over 500 in New York State, and over like 9,000 in the country. Mm-hmm. So obviously we didn't miss. I thought we were too late. We were actually ended up being very early. But I still feel like we're new because we're still learning and doing all of that. But because we started so small, I remember when we started, I was invited to speak at the New York City Homebrewers Guild meeting. And there were people in my audience who were making more beer than we were. So that was pretty humbling. So, all right, so I got a little bit of humble pie there. Like, you think, oh, I'm a home brewer who's turned pro, and that's all great. And but the opposite side of that was breweries like Brooklyn Brewery, who was, the number 1 craft brewery in terms of exports in the country. But they were our neighbors in New York City, and they welcomed us, treated us like equals, even though we were the smallest brewery in New York City. Mm-hmm. So we learned a lot from them and from others, and that helped us grow from there to feel confident to take the next step. And then, we got into starting to barrel age and do some of that. And we actually weren't looking to expand at that point. And a mutual friend of Scott and mine, who was in real estate, was asked to show a space in Brooklyn to somebody else. And he's like, I think this is perfect for you guys. Mm-hmm. And we thought we were just going to go with him to see a space, look in the windows, whatever. And we got there was a whole pitch, slideshows, like images with our logo on it in the space. we were kind of blindsided and caught off guard, but it was kind of awesome to be treated that way. And so, at that moment in time, big real estate wanted breweries in their base buildings because they could then market that to other tenants.
Right.
So we got a really great deal. Like they more or less built that space out.
We can pause.
Right. So we got this really great pitch, and they showed our logo and our in the space, and to our benefit, a bunch of other breweries had turned down this complex and this venue. So we got a really great deal. They built the space out. Like they put in probably $500,000 I don't know if I'm saying this out loud, that we didn't have to pay back. So we got this amazing deal, this amazing rent offer, and it was a really great space for us. And we called it our barrel room so that we could expand our barrel aging. So we'd brew in Queens, we'd transport the beer to Brooklyn, age it there, and then package there, and either go into bottles or kegs from there. We were open about a year there. We actually had celebrated our 1-year anniversary March 1st of 2020, and a couple weeks later, the whole world shut down. And that kind of took a turn for that location for us, where it was, post-pandemic, it was still good. It just wasn't great. It wasn't following the growth trajectory we were following. But during that downtime, Scott and I are our family, and we wanted to take a vacation and still recharge. But he owns another business too in New York City. And as business owners, we didn't want to leave the state and have to quarantine. So we're like, all right, where in New York State haven't we been? So we rented a house to be fair, he rented a house, and we joined him in the Finger Lakes. Spent a week there and just loved it. It really reminded us of our home where we were from in Wisconsin. Just kind of like, Wisconsin has a lot. We don't live on a lake in Wisconsin, but it's kind of just the atmosphere, the energy, the vibe was all very similar to what we knew. Kind of small town, and we actually were looking at vacation homes, not looking at expanding here because we had dismissed places in New York City or closer to New York City as being too far away that were much closer. But we just loved it here so much that when we got back, I was actually telling the story to some friends. They actually sent the link to me of this place being for sale. And they're kind of a ha-ha, and I'm like, called Scott. We drove up here the next day, toured the space, made a full price offer.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So we opened here. I know this is a really long answer to your question, but so when we first, got open here, it was, end of April, early May of 21. The restrictions were starting to be lifted, so we were still brewing in Queens. Had a taproom in Queens. The barrel room in Brooklyn was back open, thriving. And we were brand new here brewing, and this equipment is 3 times the size of what we have in Queens. So, we would have to brew 3 days in a row doing double batches to do what we could do in a day here. So it quickly became clear to us that it just wasn't economical to run 2 breweries. So at that point, we had 2 breweries, 3 tap rooms. We had about 30 employees, and it got to be a lot. And so we shuttered production in Queens, kept the tap room open there, did that for a couple years, I think. Then ultimately closed the tap room there about a year ago. Brooklyn, we were able to, the lease ended there, and we got out of there about 2 months ago now. And so now it really allows us to focus, 100% on the Finger Lakes and being in the Finger Lakes, not being in it, not or being part of it, not just in it, right? So, like we're trying to get involved in the community. Connor's on the board with the local farm bureau or the county farm bureau, and we're just we've always we're a farm brewery, so we source local ingredients. We know local farmers, maltsters. It's important to us to be close to our ingredients. We actually have a really cool story that I'm pretty proud of is we actually brewed a beer. I think it was 2 summers ago. That the furthest ingredient from us was 14 miles.
Really? Wow.
So like everybody's like, oh, my beer's local. I mean, it was all from the United States or like no, you can drive to where our ingredients were grown
That's awesome.
and get back here in the time it takes me to drink this beer. Like that's how close it was. We're hyper local.
So, opening this location was essentially a response to you had tap rooms in New York City and COVID hit, and you were kind of like, all right, where can we go where we don't have to be around millions of people all the time? And then you kind of
Actually, no, that wasn't the answer. So we were on a growth trajectory, right? So we went from that very small system to a 5-barrel system. About a year and a half or so after we got that, we bought 15-barrel tanks on a 5-barrel system with the anticipation of buying a 15-barrel brew house. But we couldn't fit it in our space.
Yeah. Okay.
So then we are looking at spaces adjacent to us. I could walk you around Long Island City and probably on every block show you 2 buildings that we looked at. So we had been looking to expand for probably 6 or 7 years at that point, which is why when we saw this space, it had the equipment we were looking for on 2.5 acres of land, with the building, and it was all less than what it would have cost for the equipment before we even installed it in Queens. So that was kind of what it was, is because we had been shopping and looking to expand. We had some deals that we were really excited about in the Hudson Valley that just, like, we were going to buy a property in Cold Spring, which is just beautiful, right on Hudson Valley, a lot of hiking, and would have been great. The seller just flaked out at the kind of 11th hour, or just kind of like to say the 12th hour.
Yeah.
We like making fun of people messing up cliches, so that's why we do that. But that fell through, and we were really bummed about it. But because we've been shopping and looking for so long, when you see a good deal, you recognize it.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, so that's what really appealed to us here. Was we love the venue and the location, but also it was a great value for what we were looking to do and what our growth proposition was.
So yeah, it was just the ability to produce more here, and it was just a better opportunity.
And this is where we didn't change suppliers. We could have still brewed that same beer that I was talking about that was 14 miles, but it would have been 314 miles because New York City is 300 miles from here. So we still would have worked with them, but by being here, like, we can get stuff. And when Connor and our brewer Peter are looking to brew a beer or place an order, sometimes we don't wait for delivery. We just go pick it up. Like, he'll jump in the pickup truck, and like, those are the relationships by being in the backyards of our suppliers, and we get to know our farmers. They come into the tap room and hang out, and we work closely with Cornell, and it's really, really kind of great. You can probably talk about some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's nice about being so close, is that, like the Cornell Cooperative Extension's in Geneva, so they're doing a ton of research on hops and everything. We're right in their backyard.
Yes.
As far as wholesale ingredients or malt or hops, I mean, it's all either, like, when you're really driving, you're like, hour and a half. That's going to be a long trip out there. But even that's like your real long drive. So everything's just so close, and it's nice to remain so close. And that's kind of the nice thing about being now back at one location, is instead of just trying to keep a handle on everything, it allows you to be hyper focused on, the existing 2.5 acre footprint. What can you do to make it better? How can you, get the ingredients, faster, turn out better beer, without also just constantly
Being proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. I mean, I can imagine that's just from a operational standpoint, having 3 locations. It's got to be like, you feel like your hair's on fire all the time. I
don't have any left. Yeah, it's that is a cliche that was very apropos.
Do you think that brewery owners fall into, I don't want to say it's a trap, but I guess fall in love with the idea of expanding too quickly, and the idea of having multiple tap rooms because it sounds good, and the reality is that you can maybe build a better business for you personally to run if it's one tap room that you're just really efficient at everything.
I think it depends on your model. If you're looking to be a regional or a distribution brewery, having multiple footprints is probably helpful, right? When you're a neighborhood, like come in, hang out with us type of spot, like I know now that we've closed the other 2 locations, I'm here a lot more often, and those relationships with our, not just our local regular customers, but like our suppliers and some of our, people like to say competitors. They're not. Like other brewery owners will stop in. I'll go to their places, and it's really is community. But yeah, I guess to answer the question is, it's very appealing to have multiple tap rooms, because just using very round numbers, like if we sell a keg to a distributor or to even to a bar or restaurant, if we're selling to them for $150, if we sell it over the bar in a tap room, it's about $1,000. I don't know if Cutter shook his head or not, but
no, not at all.
But so oh, this is great. Like I just want tap rooms. I just want to do all retail, and if you can do it, great. The challenge with that is you lose that personal connection you have with your customers if you can't be there. And it's not that it's just about me necessarily. Like everyone of our taproom staff, as people coming to see them, like I filled in for somebody last week. They're like, "Where's Kurt?" I'm like, "Oh, he has a day off." And sorry, you have me, right? But there is a really personal connection with craft beer that you don't get in bars, restaurants, other places necessarily. That you can get them in that if they're a small spot, but as soon as like they become multiple locations, like there are still people who think we were a chain when we had 3. Yeah. Like, oh, you're the owner of all 3. I'm like, yeah. Like we never got more than like 700 barrels in a year. Like there are breweries dumping more beer down the drain every day than we brewed at all of our locations. So it's not just about having the locations and expansion and chasing the dollar of being able to sell retail. It's about building those bonds and community and relationships.
Yeah. So having multiple tap rooms only makes sense if you also have a large distribution footprint and you're looking to kind of get multiple.
Every situation's unique.
Yeah.
Like we had a GM, running our 2 spots in the city, and he did a great job. But getting back and forth, it's a lot, and you need, and we had really great people, and it just gets really hard. Yeah. We're still a very small company. We were trying to operate like we were a chain. Yeah. But we weren't, and that had its challenges, and it takes its toll, and it was great, it was fun, and I'm glad we did it. But yeah, it was a lot.
I'm sure. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you guys are doing now to get more involved in the community and expand your footprint in the Finger Lakes?
You want to jump in, Colin?
Yeah. So currently I'm on the Farm Bureau board, and then aside from that, I guess I'm in the transition phase right now, where it was my wife coaches volleyball at a local high school, so then I met a ton of the community through that, and that took a shocking amount of my time as well. But I guess right now I'm in like this weird transition phase where we're about to start our family, so then I'm currently ramping down personal level involvement with the community for when it's about to ramp, I think, back up in about tenfold in like 2 years here as daycare sports and schools and coaching soccer and all that stuff's about to take
They start
off.
travel teams at like 2 years old now? Is that how this works?
I think like five years old is like, all right, baseball, soccer, basketball, full year schedule.
You got to pick one. That's it. I don't agree with that, but that is kind of the way things are.
Introduce them to everything and then see what they run with.
But also in the terms of community, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, by all means. I was just saying I was winding down to get ready.
So the other thing we've done is we've recently formed a group, an organization around Seneca Lake with the other breweries around the lake, which has been kind of a great community building thing, not just being in a community, but in like-minded people who are in the same business, and we kind of share challenges, growth opportunities. We all work to promote each other. People are like, oh, aren't those your competition? And I always say we're in competition with them, not against them. Yeah. But we're like there's mixed reviews on the name of the organization. So we are the Seneca Lake Order of Brewers, and often we present it publicly that way. But internally, we call ourselves the Slobs. So that's the acronym, Seneca Lake Order of Brewers. And we like to say,
awesome.
we're in the wine country of New York and in the Finger Lakes, and people often refer to wine people as snobs. So like we have wine snobs, and we're the beer slobs.
I love that so much. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things as we were driving up here, we were blown away by the amount of wineries around. Like, we were driving up here, and probably within 20 minutes, there were 20 wineries just driving up this road on the way to you
I
guys.
think it's 72 on the lake, or like,
I had thought it was 90. It's a lot.
It was-
and that's just on like.
Well,
this
you're just on
lake.
the one side of the lake you came
Yeah,
up, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen so many wineries in such a densely popular, or just such a close proximity. To
Yeah,
another.
they've been great partners, really. Like it's not like we're competing against the wineries either, because a lot of the wineries Connor's been able to sell our beer too, so they actually carry our beer. We sell wine in our tap room too.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've been really cool to work with, because like people come into the brewery asking like what wineries should they go to, and like people going to the wineries like, oh, we want to catch a beer, because when you're doing tourism as a group, not everybody in that group is a wine person, not everybody's a beer person.
Yeah.
And so when we opened, I guess 3.5 years ago, this is our fourth summer now, there was like on the wine trail from Watkins Glen up to us, there were 3 breweries. Like we were on the north end. Climbing Vines was kind of about halfway down the lake, and then Seneca Lake Brewing Company was just north of Watkins Glen. You get into Watkins Glen, there's more. You get into Geneva, there's more. But kind of in this stretch of road between the north and south end of the lake, that was it. And there's been several more that have opened up now. Relative Risk, Seneca Stag, Tin Barn. Like there's, I'm sure I'm missing some, but there's been a bunch now, and like people are out doing their wine tours, and they want to stop at a brewery. We're thrilled to be part of that, and that's a whole other animal.
Yeah.
And that the wineries open at 10 a.m. So normally you think, oh, we got a group coming in at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. They're just getting started, but they're done sometimes.
Yeah.
They literally spill off the buses, and we've unfortunately had to turn some of them away over the years, but it's been a lot more positive than negative, and in that way, it's been great that having so many wineries close that brings a lot of tourism, and we do a significant chunk of our revenue just in the summer months where people are coming in, and it's just like every hour you get a new tour group coming through, or groups of tour groups sometimes.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying in the wineries, they did like a lot of the legwork as far as the Finger Lakes being like a craft beverage destination, with them kind of carrying the flag forward at wine. And then now it's exciting, with so many breweries entering the space where the Finger Lakes are kind of slowly developing into wine country to now wine and beer country. And even I was working an event this past Saturday, and there was like 3 more distilleries that I hadn't heard of. So
Really?
so it's turning into a fantastic destination for like all things craft beverage, where you can do it all, go with any group as long as they like craft alcohol, I guess. There's not any craft soda yet, but
Yeah.
as long as you're into craft alcohol, there's something to do.
Almost every bus they get off drinking White Claws or something not craft. So
There's still some long bus rides.
so between stops they're not hitting craft, but they're hitting craft spots, and we appreciate it.
They're getting every single category in. That sounds like a great vacation.
Yeah, I found some High Life cans in our garbage can this last weekend. So
Oh, God.
I was just mad they didn't bring me any. It's a great beer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because I was wondering if that many wineries in such a close proximity helps or hurts the business, and it sounds like it helps, which is great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, like I meant, they really did carry the flag forward. Like a lot of people come up here. Like I had a couple weekends ago, like a big group come in from Wisconsin, and they were like, "Oh, we just heard of Finger Lakes through a wine magazine." But then they found us, and then found out I'm from Wisconsin, and then they ended up like coming here, 3 nights in a row. But yeah, just having it be a craft beverage destination's fantastic, and it's super helpful for everyone. And I think down the lake too.
And we've always been kind of supporters of the rising tide raises all boats, or whatever the shit saying is. And if there's like one, no matter how good your brewery is, if you're just kind of on an island and you're the only one in that spot, like you'll if you're good, you're going to get a good following. But having others in your area, your immediate area, isn't bad.
Right.
Because, and especially in this case, because it's not just breweries, it's wineries and distilleries. And actually some of the local breweries make cider. We actually sell their cider here. So it's, something for everybody. And that's really kind of been the trend the last couple of years in alcohol in general is people aren't drinking the same way they were, not necessarily pre-pandemic. I just think there's a new, like the younger generation who's coming up, like they were, kind of taught that alcohol is bad in a way that, we were told pot was bad, right?
Yeah.
And the attitudes about pot are changing. And it's, so we're seeing less instances of people just drinking alcohol, period, and hanging out. And there's been all kinds of, articles and stories about that. But it's having a density of places to go for people who do want to do that. And then it's, like I said, like, why do you want to come here versus somewhere else? And I think we have a great experience. We've got the fire pits. We do cornhole tournaments. We do music. We've got a lot going on here. You can go anywhere and get a beer, or get wine, and any of those things. But we want you to come here and enjoy it. But if what brought you here was wineries or distilleries or other breweries, that's okay too. Like we love them.
I guess that is kind of a nice thing about the location that you guys are in, which makes this a little unique, is the fact that you're a tourist destination for craft beverage consumers. In a way, kind of shields you from the decline in alcohol consumption nationwide, because the group of people that are coming here are specifically looking for that.
Yes and no. I mean, numbers don't support that to the way I would like them to. But I think in general you are right in that we are probably better shielded than others because we have that, and people are coming here specifically for mostly wine tourism, to call it what it is, but craft beverage tourism, and that's great. It is a limited window for that piece of it, and it's those off seasons. It's almost like we're a bear getting fat for the hibernation, right? So we need to do well enough through that season to carry us through the winter, where it is a long cold winter.
It's tight.
And so we're you have to be really careful budgeting, planning, like how much do we want to brew, what volume, how many brands, and that's what Connor and our brewer Pete work on is, all right, how much volume do you think we can sell, what's the shelf life, because we could brew something now, and if it's not going to be sold out before its shelf life, then we either can't brew that much or we can't brew it at all. So these are all considerations that you have to make because of having such a heavy season through the summer and then such a light season through the winter. How do you plan and budget for that?
And then also with alcohol drinking being down, at the same time, craft beverages, what I think we're all doing a really nice job at, is kind of still being like a town square for every local community. Because there are so many breweries now, you're not going to be like, what's your region? And it's like most of the Northeast, your region is really your own backyard. But what so many of us do a good job at is being like dog friendly, kid friendly, where if alcohol is not your number one primary concern is how much alcohol am I going to drink at this outing. There's still a ton to do. You can still bring your kids. You can chalk up the sidewalks, play games, and that's true for our location, but also true for a bunch of other. So it's just about being creative and understanding that alcohol's role has changed. The importance of gathering and hanging out is still more prevalent than ever.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never heard someone describe it as a town square before. But it's true. I mean, that's kind of what you guys...
It's the model you want to be in, as much as you can.
There are people who want to go to their corner pub and drink, to remember, drink to forget, whatever it is they're doing, right? But they don't want kids around. They don't want dogs around. And that's fine. And, some of them just want cheap beer. Like, there are great places to go drink cheap beer. And I don't think our beer is expensive, but it is a different element when you're doing such small batch and sourcing locally and I personally wish consumers cared more about it. They don't, and that's fine. As long as they're enjoying the beer, enjoying the experience, that's what's really important. But to Connor's point, it's we are dog friendly, we're kid friendly. It's where you're gonna hang out. Like we have games. Like you don't have to come get them. Like your dog comes in, we're holding the treat when they come through the door. You bring in a kid, we got a bucket full of chalk, sidewalk chalk. Like you let your kid chalk up whatever they want.
Yeah.
Enjoy a couple beers. Hang out. We'll light a fire for you. It's not any one thing. It's everything.
Yeah. Well, I think the experience that you guys offer here really kind of fits the lake vibe too. Like the outdoor fire pits, you're watching the lake. It's awesome.
I wish we had a better view of the lake, but yes, it is. We certainly carry that vibe.
Until a big enough storm knocks down the country club's trees.
You just gotta get
In the
out there
winter,
and
you can see it when the leaves are off the trees.
There you
You got a nice view of that.
Yeah, well, hey, that's perfect time
When
for
you
a
don't
fire,
want to be
too.
sitting outside in Western New York. But
Just crank the fire up a little higher.
you
add
can look
some
out the
wood to
window.
it.
Yeah. Think
That's
fondly. Think positive thoughts. It'll be great.
Yeah. Well, so I wanna wrap up here just with what's your advice for other brewery owners who are looking to build a good taproom experience? What are some of the key elements that you think make you guys successful in offering that experience to your customers?
There's not any one right answer, I guess is probably what I would lead with. And having 3 locations, and they all were different. Like what worked in Queens didn't work in Brooklyn, even though they both were New York City. And being in the Finger Lakes, what works here didn't work there, and vice versa. So it's figuring out what your audience likes, but also it's got to be easy. It's got to be true to who you are. And I think a lot of what we've done here reflects kind of our roots and where we were from in Wisconsin, but also our experiences in New York City. And there's a dichotomy there, but there are things that overlap and that make sense. And I can walk you through our tap room and show things like this is an element from Brooklyn, this is an element from Queens. So, some of this stuff is what we brought. Like we're big yard games people in our family and in Wisconsin in general. Like, anything you can do with a beer in your hand, we're fans of. The United States curling team trains in Wisconsin. They don't do it, but I'm pretty sure you can do curling with a beer in your hand. It'd be much more interesting as an Olympic sport. It's still really interesting. I love watching it. But yeah, I think it's identify what works for your location, what works for your people. Because if you're trying to get people to do something they're not comfortable with, that's not going to work either.
Yeah.
It doesn't translate. But that's also not to say that we've figured it out. Like I don't know. We're still guessing every day,
Well,
trying new stuff.
That makes a lot of sense, though. I think sometimes brewery owners try to force customers into a certain type of playbook, and it makes sense. Like different people around different parts of the country are different, and you need to match your taproom experience to what your local audience wants.
And sometimes you think the demographic you want, the demographic you have, aren't the same. But I guess maybe you got to think more like, why do I think that's not the demographic for us, right? And if that's who's coming here, what are they like?
Yeah.
Like instead of trying to get people who aren't your demographic to come to your space, cater to your demographic.
Yeah.
So it's you got to be flexible, but you also got to have your eyes open, right? And that's been a thing for me. Like we thought we wanted one thing and learned that we actually aren't that, and because what works for another brewery doesn't work for us.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Just be authentic. Be diligent in whatever you see, and don't be afraid to try new things, because
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah, this is what we have here, but there's been 100 iterations. There'll be 100 more.
Yeah.
Some will be cool. Some events won't be that awesome, but it's just.
And some of my favorite, coolest events weren't profitable. They didn't work out, but they were fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what makes this such a cool industry too. It's like you can just, try different things, try different events, try new beers, and it's like no matter what you do, you're gonna have fun along the way.
Yeah, you're just making memories with your customers at the end of the day, where it's like the funnier stories are usually the days that everything goes really shitty, and then like a customer will see you and be like, wow, you look miserable. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty miserable, but that weirdly builds brand loyalty at the same time. So just be authentic the whole time. Be kind. But yeah, Kyle, I'll let you have it.
Yeah, struggling is relatable, right? But
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Well, last question. How can people find out about you guys?
I don't know any of our socials off the top of my head.
This is the guy with the marketing degree.
I quickly transferred it to sales. Yeah, I did sales. I don't really.
BigAliceBrewing.com.
There you go.
At Big
Alice Brewing FLX.
That's what I didn't know.
FLX,
Is
yeah.
if we spelt out Finger Lakes or if it's FLX?
Both still exist. So initially, Big Alice Brewing was our New York City preference. Big Alice Brewing FLX was the Finger Lakes. We will be working towards merging them, but you can follow both.
Cool.
And find out all of our things there. So we do publish all of our events and beer releases and all that stuff through our website and our social media.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.